Hey everybody, I just wanted to do a little bit of a video about Rooster Hackle and colors and how they are labeled now versus what we might see in some older texts in terms of naming conventions. Of course, naming conventions are a little bit all over the place. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what it's named, it matters what it looks like, and so that we understand what these different types of hackle are supposed to look like as they were described throughout time. Of course, name conventions change. So this is a little bit of my collection of hackle the Rooster Hackle that I've gathered over the years. Most of it's whiting, but you see there's a little bit of Metz in there. I have a couple Collins out, and so I'm gonna kind of walk through them a little bit and show you them, and then we're going to read some text, and I'll show you a little bit of the what the text calls them, and we'll look at what these things are actually labeled as well. But over here is just a little grouping of duns. Of course, dun is was a magical, prestigious color, still is today, and it's a lot easier to get today than it was back in history. It was a lot harder to achieve. But here we have different ranging in style. This here is a Derby cape, or what Feather Emporium sold as Derby. This is sort of a very light dun. There's a little bit of a lemony edge to it. The list, as you might be able to see, is a very light dun, and then the edge goes to a sort of very shiny, almost pale white, primrose yellow. You could call this a very light honey dun, light dun. Those names would qualify here. And then here's sort of a classic Metz cape. I believe this is from the 70s, and what they called blue dun. This is a new line that Jim's Fly Co. has called Beaver Kill, which I believe is the same as the Derby that was sold or is sold on Feather Emporium, but I'm not 100% sure on that. You can see color-wise, it's fairly similar to the Metz, maybe a tiny bit darker, but a beautiful medium dun. And I believe Jim has named this, medium gray dun. So there you go, that kind of fits that. The Metz naming convention just says variant. Not so useful, of course. Here's, this is from Jim's Fly Co. This one here, this is a dark dun, or what he calls gray dun, dark gray dun. That's a beautiful cape with a darker gray with a little bit of a blue tinge. This is another Derby cape. Hopefully you can see here. There we go, the color kind of adjusted on the video, but this is brown, like a brown dun, chocolate dun, brown dun, that type of naming convention. And then we come over to these categories that are called rusty or honey dun. And these things are a little bit challenging. The naming conventions a little bit all over the place. And in history, the names of these have changed. A lot of books sort of describe what they are. In my general understanding, and we'll go through some of the texts, but if the central list, as you can see here, the central list is done. Here also, I don't know if you can see so well in the video, but the central list, or the central color of each of the hackles, here you can sort of see a little bit better, maybe here as well, how this central list, that central part is a dun color. And those are what we call bicolors. So there's two colors to the hackle. And through most of history, These would all fall in what is called honey dun category. And whether it's light, like here and here, or becomes darker here, would just be called dark honey dun, light honey dun, medium honey dun, okay? These two capes down here are rise form from Magpie Materials. This one has a little bit of barring up here as you get close to the comb of the bird, but then in between the sheets and underneath, if you will, you can see as the little larger size, you get more of the honey, light honey dun. Here is what would be called I would call it dark honey dun. Somebody might call this a rusty dun, but I believe a better name for it and better terminology for it would be dark honey dun. This is a Herbert Minor. And this, in my opinion, is a dark honey dun. It's sold here as a natural rusty dun. And so this is, it's a prized hackle. And a lot of people pay a lot of money for rusty dun as the name. I think a better name, it's a beautiful hackle and it's worth the money, regardless of what they call it. But I believe a better name for it would be dark honey dun. This is a Collins cape, and this is what Charlie Collins, and this is a low grade cape, what he calls a rusty dun. So in general, it's a light dun with rust hints throughout the hackle. And maybe you can see here on the saddle a little bit better the rusty tone to the blue dun, and that's what he calls a rusty dun. And it's a different thing, and we'll talk about what I think is a rusty dun. I don't have a true rusty dun according to the naming conventions. And then what's sometimes called like barred ginger, or barred red these days, is a grizzly looking hackle where the barring is more of a reddish ginger color. And in older days, this was called cuckoo. And that coloring is called cuckoo. You see patterns that call for cuckoo, in that sort of medium barred ginger barring kind of type of thing. And then coming over here, we have other bicolors, but now the list is black, right? Sometimes this type of hackle here, where the list is black and the outer edge is white, yellow, golden, would be referred to as badger. And then over here, where it's red or brown, it would be referred to as furnace. Most of the old timers, and we'll go through some descriptions, consider both these to be furnace, and that this here would be a red furnace, and this here would be a yellow furnace. And I think it's fine if you call it badger. These two are both from the Heritage line. What's really cool about the Heritage line is that these are, as you go back in antiquity, and it's hard to see here, but a true furnace as they wanted it had a black list, red, and then black again on the tips. And these feathers do have that. Sometimes there's a whole debate about what's Coqui Bondu and whatnot. I'm not going to get into that, but here, I don't know if you can see so well, but there's a little black tips on the list there, and the same with the yellow furnace. If I can get a feather here, this one also has black as you get to the edges, black tips, which is very cool, and those are great hackles to have. And so just wanted to go over that a little bit, and then we'll look at some sources of writing on it and naming of the different colors, and we'll talk about it from there. Okay, let's look at some books here. There's only one book out there that that's specific to fly tying that talks about hackle, and that's Frank Elder's The Book of the Hackle. And this book is quite impressive. It was published in 1979, so it's more of a recent publishing, but it does encompass both some information about hackles and colors and shapes, how breeding was accomplished and breeding done, a little bit of the history of the birds, and also a little bit of the history of the hackle industry and how we get to where we are today, and how feathers were collected. For most of history, hackle was sold as individual hackles, and they were taken from dead birds. But here we talk about, he talks about color, and he makes some proposals about how he thinks colors should be organized. And he does admit that colors are a little bit all over the place, and that there's, not an organized naming convention, but these are sort of where he suggests, okay. So over here we talk about bicolors, where the list is blue dun and not black, and that's these duns that we're going to talk about here. So a dun, as he says, a true dun is the color of a primary feather of a starling. Blue dun is more of a blue-gray with a strong, medium, or weak overtone of brown, right? So sort of the color of steel. Rusty dun, we come down here to how he describes as a blue dun hackle, which looks as if it had been sprinkled with rust. The color should lie on top of the blue, right? They should not appear as two clean-cut separate colors as in a bicolor. So it's not a bicolor. In other words, the list is not a different color from the edges. The whole feather has a dun, and then it's sprinkled, like it's flecked or spangled with rust. We come over to honey dun here, and this is a bicolor, where the list is blue dun and the outer side yellow or honey, right? So, and then it can be something that's dark or light, and that goes in any one of those spectrums. So that's kind of important in terms of how he describes it. One of the probably most underrated books out there, and those who know, is The Art of Tying the Wet Fly. And I have the later edition that has the inclusion of Pete Heide's and Fishing the Flymph. But this is co-authored by Lysenring and Heide. And the book is just exceptional in terms of its details about how to tie flies and gather tying materials, and in terms of its description of colors. And here we are in the hackle chapter, and I'll just read this because it's absolutely fantastic. Furnace. So furnace has a very dark black or blue dun list next to the stem and on the tips of the tips of the fibers. So the central color of the list is both on the on that part and the tips. In between the dark list and tips is a good color, usually a red, yellow, white, or silver. The hackles which show these three distinct markings are known as furnace hackles, and the names such as red furnace, yellow furnace determine the color, right, that's in between, okay? Badger also has a dark list and colored fibers, but here the color of the fibers extends from the list clear to the tips of the fibers. Thus, the badger differs from the furnace in that the dark list does not appear on the tips of the fibers, right? Blue dun, a smoky gray color from the palest pearl gray to the darkest blue gray. Rusty blue dun, same as blue dun, except that it has a rust or reddish appearance when held up to the light. Okay, so that fits a little bit more of what Collins sells, right, as his rusty dun. Brassy blue dun, a blue dun with a yellowish tinge, okay? So maybe that cape that I showed you in the beginning, the light blue dun with the lemony kind of yellowish tinge would be a brassy blue dun. Honey dun has a gray or blue dun list with honey-colored fiber ends. When the list is dark, the hackle is called a dark honey dun. And when the list is light, the hackle is called a light honey dun. Okay, so here he's shifting from what Elder talks about, in that the dark or light for the honey dun is based on the color of the list, the depth and darkness of the blue part, the dun part, not the color of the edges. So, you know, interesting stuff in how these various authors talk about it. This is Silk Fern Feathers, which is a after Skews died, was put together of a collection, if you will, of his articles in the Fishing Gazette and or the Journal of the Fly Fishers Club of London related to fly tying. And here I have the section where he talks about colors of feathers. Badger hackles are those with black or dark center and cream or white points, or else black or dark center and edge and white or cream between. So, you know, again, he's differing a little bit there from Lysing Ring versus Badger and Furnace. Cuckoo or Creel feathers are those mottled black and white. So for him, what we call grizzly is called cuckoo. Let's see, Ginger's honey duns over here. Honey duns, blues that is, with mixtures of red or ginger in varying degrees are invaluable. Get all you can of both sexes, meaning hens and roosters. The colors are usually separate in the hens, but mingled in the cocks. The ground being blue and the honey or ginger or rust spangled on the surface, okay? So he's not talking about a central list, he's talking about a sprinkling or a flecking. So when he refers to honey dun in his patterns, he's talking about something that has honey flecks or golden flecks, right? The reds. In reds, there's a great variety of shades from almost ginger to blood red or deep mahogany. They are so common that it is worthwhile to confine one's selection to those in high condition and of good shape, as well as colors. Those looking chalky or yellow on the underside should be rejected. Now, this is a big problem in the reds and ginger colors, is that unfortunately, even in top breeders these days, whiting and whatnot, you will find on the backs of the feathers that they are white and chalky. And these guys noticed that and found it to be very prestigious when they were on both sides. And I wanted to just go over here to look at Cutcliffe for a second, because, you know, obviously I love Cutcliffe, but Devon was super famous for having great hackle and throughout history. And he says the best of all fowls for hackles is the Old English gamecock, which, however, is now very difficult to be obtained, and that's in 1863. No bird seems to have such lustrous, shining, stiff, and well-shaped feathers as this game fowl, such as was used in times of yore for cockfighting. So for him, the shine and lustrousness is very important. And that's really cool. And then he goes on to talk about how they can be bred here. And then come down here to this part. These rusty feathers are by far the most rare and by far the best when obtained. They combine several colors and shot, as it were, over the surface of a rich, glossy grounding in blue and red. And on scrutinizing their surface carefully, we perceive the exact similarity in tints of shading to the natural color of various furs. At the ends of hare's flax, water rat, mouse, and fox fur, pulled out and mixed well. So if you, and I'll show you a picture of the back of a hare, and if you shave it the way Cutcliffe does, we'll see a little bit of how the shades become that kind of rusty dun. So really interesting stuff, lots of things to consider. The naming conventions are a little bit all over the place, and it's hard to say, but once you begin to understand these things, you know, looking at your collection or what you buy, you can sort of match these patterns. This is maybe what Lyson Ring was talking about, the brassy blue dun. And there we have it. Thank you. Okay, so to just finish up with what Cutcliffe was talking about, this is a piece of fur from a wild hare, an English wild hare. And you can see I've taken complete parts, but also the way Cutcliffe describes to remove the fur for dubbing is to take a razor and lie it flat and go with the grain here. So basically what you're doing, and you can see I've done it over here, is you leave this fluff and the black behind, and you take the top part, which he calls the part that gives the hair its color. And if you look here, that's what that is. And I'm gonna try and zoom in on it a little bit more and show you that it's, whoops, there we go. It's in here in the sun. Hopefully you can see it where you get, it's a dun background with flecking of rust, right? And that's I think the rusty dun that he's talking about, and we talk about the flecking. And we can kind of come over here and see, this is what Charlie Collins is calling rusty dun. And we can see there is some resemblance there. The dun factor might be too light. The rust is definitely there, but they do have a little bit of a matchy match that would work for a Cutcliffe fly. There are a few darker dun feathers in here. Let's see if I can get one to line up in the camera here. That might match a little bit more that coloring. And so that I think is what you know Cutcliffe was talking about in terms of his coloring here. And then just to show you, I think we can do it here on the Heritage with the reds. Here you can see how that's a beautiful red, but then when I turn it over, you see how it's white, a little bit whiter and chalky. So for a Cutcliffe, that would be subpar. That would not be good, would not make the cut because of that color difference. But that's like something that's very, very hard to get in terms of hackle these days. I think, you know, only, you know, if you can get your hands on red Old English game, some of the smaller growers do a little bit better job in that, and, you know, having a little bit better color throughout. But you can see here, you know, Rise Form even having that kind of issue as well. The reds are really, really difficult. It's one of the natural characteristics of the original, you know, jungle fowl, that it has that characteristic with the red, and takes some selective breeding to kind of to get hackles that are a little bit better on the back in the reds. And you know, even on any individual bird, there's going to be some particular feathers that don't meet that, and some that do. So just things to think about and consider and get to know as we go out there. And, you know, for those of us that are super hardcore geeks in fly tying, the fish, you know, of course, don't really care about much of this stuff, but we do. And That's what's fun. So just thought I'd talk about that for a little bit. Thank you.